It was supposed to be the perfect Thanksgiving. Golden turkey, happy family, a loving husband. But behind the smiles, Kate was hiding bruises. That night, her husband walked through the door with his pregnant mistress. What happened next shattered her body, her home, and her heart. He broke his pregnant wife's leg right at the dinner table. Then he took her daughter, froze her bank accounts, had her committed to a psychiatric ward. He thought he'd won. He thought she was destroyed. He was wrong. What she does next will make you scream, cry, and believe in justice again. Stay until the end. You won't see that twist coming. And if this story hits you, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss another story that hits where it hurts and heals where it matters. My hands trembled as I set the Thanksgiving table for the last time. The china plates clinked together, betraying my fear. I knew something terrible would happen that night. I just didn't know my husband would break my leg in front of our daughter, or that it was all part of his plan. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 8 hours earlier, when I still believed I might escape. The November sun filtered through our suburban kitchen windows as I basted the turkey for the third time. Our home in Westchester looked like something from a magazine spread. Marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, fresh flowers on every surface. Everything perfect, everything a lie. I paused at the kitchen island, my 7-month pregnant belly pressing against the counter. My hand moved unconsciously to the small voice recorder hidden behind the flour canister. I'd been collecting evidence for 3 months now. Ryan's threats, his cruel words when he thought no one could hear. The way his voice changed from charming businessman to something cold and frightening the moment we were alone. Grace had been right. My best friend and divorce attorney had warned me 2 weeks ago during our secret meeting at her office. Kate, you need to leave now. Today. The longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes. I'd promised her I would. I'd signed the divorce papers she drafted, transferred money to a secret account, packed a bag hidden in Emma's closet. I just needed the right moment, the perfect time when Ryan wouldn't suspect. Turns out, I was already too late. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan, bringing someone to dinner. Client emergency. Be home at 6. Something cold settled in my stomach. Ryan never brought work home, especially not on Thanksgiving. I looked around our kitchen at the feast I'd spent 2 days preparing. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potato casserole, 3 different pies. All of it for our small family. Emma, Ryan, and me. Why would he bring a stranger to our Thanksgiving? Emma toddled into the kitchen, her blonde curls bouncing. Mommy, when's Daddy coming home soon? Baby, I lifted her onto my hip, breathing in her innocent little girl smell. She had Ryan's blue eyes, but thank God, nothing else of his. Go play with your blocks. Sweetie, dinner will be ready soon. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Ryan had a key. He never rang the doorbell. I checked the security camera screen by the door. Ryan stood there in his expensive suit, his carefully styled brown hair perfect as always. And next to him stood a young woman in a red dress, beautiful, confident, pregnant. My blood turned to ice. I opened the door with Emma clinging to my leg. Ryan's smile was warm and easy, the same smile that had charmed me 7 years ago when we met at a charity gala. The same smile he wore in public while destroying me in private. Kate, sweetheart. Ryan kissed my cheek, his hand gripping my arm just a fraction too tight. A warning, this is Melissa Cooper, my business partner. She didn't have anywhere to go tonight, and I couldn't leave her alone on Thanksgiving. You don't mind, do you? The words were phrased as a question, but delivered as a statement. I looked at Melissa, really looked at her. Mid-20s, designer dress, diamond earrings, and a pregnant belly roughly the same size as mine. Of course not, I heard myself say. The autopilot politeness of a woman who'd learned that resistance only made things worse. Please, come in. Ryan walked past me into our home. Melissa following, he moved through the space like he owned it. Which, technically, he did. The house was in his parents' trust. My name wasn't on the deed, but I'd learned that fact 3 months ago, the same week I'd started hiding the recorder. Something smells amazing, Melissa said. Her voice was sweet, almost apologetic. You've gone to so much trouble. It's no trouble at all. Another automatic lie. I gestured toward the living room. Please, make yourself comfortable. Dinner's almost ready. Emma stood in the hallway, staring at the strangers in her home. Daddy? Who's that lady? Ryan scooped her up, his public father persona snapping into place. This is Miss Melissa. Princess. She works with Daddy. Can you say hello? Hello? Emma whispered, suddenly shy. We settled around the dining table, the perfect American Thanksgiving scene. Except nothing about this was normal. Ryan sat at the head of the table, Melissa to his right, me to his left, Emma in her booster seat next to me, playing with her mashed potatoes. I served food with mechanical precision, my mind racing. Why was she here? Why tonight? What was Ryan planning? Melissa, Ryan said casually, cutting into his turkey. Why don't you tell Kate about the Singapore project? Melissa's eyes flickered to Ryan, then to me. Oh, it's been incredible. Ryan and I spent 3 weeks there last month. The hotel had the most amazing view. We worked so closely together. I honestly don't know what I'd do without him. Last month, Ryan had told me that trip was solo, business only, too dangerous for a pregnant wife to travel. My hand tightened around my fork. Ryan's phone sat face up on the table. It lit up with a text message. From M. Can't wait to tell her about our baby tonight. The message sat there. Visible to everyone, Ryan made no move to hide it. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her hand moving to her belly. The room tilted slightly. Our baby. Not his baby. Our baby. Ryan, I said quietly, can I speak with you in the kitchen? Whatever you need to say, you can say here. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were hard. We're all family now. Melissa is pregnant. I forced the words out. Yes. Ryan smiled. She is. Is it yours? The question hung in the air like poison gates. Emma stopped playing with her food, sensing the tension. Melissa's face flushed red. Kate, Ryan said slowly, I think we need to have an honest conversation. One we should have had months ago. He stood up, walked around the table, and sat in the chair directly across from me. His movements were deliberate, calculated. This was a performance he'd rehearsed. Melissa and I are in love. His voice was calm, matter of fact. She's carrying my son. I want a divorce. The words landed like physical blows. Emma started crying. Melissa pulled out her phone, angling it subtly toward me. She was recording. This was planned. All of it. The Thanksgiving dinner. Melissa's presence. The text message left visible. Ryan wanted me to react. Needed me to react. He was setting me up. But for what you brought your pregnant mistress to our Thanksgiving dinner? My voice shook. In front of our daughter. I brought my partner. Ryan corrected. You're being hysterical. Kate, this is why we need the divorce. You're unstable. Unstable? That word. He'd been using it for months, planting seeds with our friends, with Emma's pediatrician, with everyone who would listen. My wife's been struggling since her miscarriage 2 years ago. She has mood swings. I'm worried about her mental state. I stood up too fast, my pregnant belly throwing off my balance. I reached for my water glass, but my hand found the wine glass instead, the one I'd poured for appearance's sake but hadn't touched. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I threw the water at Melissa. It wasn't wine, it was water, but the effect was the same. Melissa gasped, her red dress soaking wet. Her phone captured everything. You're insane, Melissa shrieked. Ryan moved fast, too fast. His hand locked around my wrist, the same wrist he'd bruised a dozen times before. But this time, he didn't just squeeze. He shoved. I stumbled backward, my feet tangling. My pregnant belly hit the edge of the table first. Then I fell, hard, my leg twisting underneath my body at an impossible angle. The crack echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Emma started screaming. High-pitched, terrified screams that seemed to come from somewhere far away. I tried to move. White-hot agony exploded from my leg, shooting up through my entire body. I looked down and saw my shin bent at an unnatural angle. Ryan, I gasped. The baby, please. I need an ambulance. Ryan stood over me, straightening his tie. His face was cold, blank. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Yes, my wife fell. She attacked my colleague and fell. She's pregnant. Please hurry. He knelt beside me, and for just a second, his mask dropped. He leaned close, whispering so only I could hear. You should have just signed the papers. Kate, now you'll lose everything. The ambulance ride blurred together in waves of pain. Emma's crying, Melissa's fake concerned voice, Ryan's hand holding mine in the ambulance, playing the devoted husband for the paramedics. Hang on, sweetheart, he murmured. Just hang on. But I could see it in his eyes. This was all going according to his plan. The emergency room at Westchester Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and fear. Fluorescent lights too bright, nurses moving with practiced efficiency. A doctor appeared, young and competent looking, checking my chart. Dr. Robert Matthews. He introduced himself. Let's get you comfortable and see what we're dealing with. The pain was beyond anything I'd experienced. Worse than childbirth. Worse than the miscarriage 2 years ago that had sent me spiraling into depression. Every heartbeat sent fresh agony through my leg. My baby. I kept saying, please check my baby first. Dr. Matthews pressed a fetal monitor to my belly. The steady thump, thump, thump of my son's heartbeat filled the room. Thank God. Thank God. Baby's heart rate is strong, Dr. Matthews said. But your leg is another story, Baron. You have a tibial plateau fracture. It needs surgical repair within 6 hours, or you risk permanent damage. Then do it. Please, just do the surgery. Dr. Matthews hesitated. Glancing at someone behind me, I need consent from your medical power of attorney first. I'm right here. My voice was desperate. I consent. Do the surgery. Actually, a smooth voice said from the doorway, I hold medical power of attorney. Ryan entered, followed by a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. This is Richard Sullivan, my attorney. Ryan's voice was calm, reasonable. We need to discuss the surgical options. No, the word came out as a sob. Ryan, please. The doctor said 6 hours. My leg needs surgery now. Ryan sat in the chair next to my bed, took my hand gently. To anyone watching, he looked like a concerned husband. Kate, listen to me. The anesthesia poses risks to our baby. I've been researching this. We should try conservative treatment first. Cast, elevation, monitoring. Dr. Matthews cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, I understand your concerns, but the fracture really should be. The legal documents say I have authority during her incapacity. Ryan interrupted smoothly. My wife suffered a psychiatric episode tonight. She violently attacked my pregnant colleague. She's not in a state to make rational medical decisions. That's not true. I tried to sit up, but pain lanced through me. Dr. Matthews, please. He pushed me. He broke my leg. You can't let him do this. The doctor's eyes flickered with something. Sympathy, maybe, or doubt. But Ryan's attorney stepped forward, placing documents on the medical cart. The medical power of attorney was signed 3 years ago. Mr. Sullivan said, it's legally binding. During periods of mental incapacity, Mr. Bennett has full authority over his wife's medical care. I'm not mentally incapacitated. My voice rose. I was attacked by my husband. This is abuse. Ryan's expression shifted to concern so perfectly performed it might have been genuine. See what I mean? Doctor, she's been having these paranoid episodes for months. Ever since the miscarriage, I've been trying to get her help, but she refuses treatment. He pulled out his phone, showed Dr. Matthews something. Text messages, carefully curated, taken out of context, making me look unstable, irrational, dangerous. My wife has threatened self-harm before. Ryan said quietly, I have documentation from her therapist. This behavior tonight, attacking an innocent woman, it's part of a pattern. That's not... I couldn't form the words. The pain was too much. He was twisting everything, and I couldn't think clearly enough to fight back. Dr. Matthews looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Bennett, I strongly recommend surgery. The longer we wait, the worse the outcome. We'll wait, Ryan said firmly. Conservative treatment. If her condition worsens, we'll reconsider. The doctor opened his mouth to argue, but Ryan's attorney placed another document on the cart. Whatever it said made Dr. Matthews go pale. I'll prepare the cast, the doctor said quietly. And pain medication. They gave me Tylenol, not morphine, not anything strong enough to touch the agony in my leg, just Tylenol. Because of the baby, because Ryan, who had just broken my leg, was suddenly concerned about our baby's safety. A nurse came to take Emma, who'd been sitting in the corner with a hospital volunteer, still crying. Mommy, Emma sobbed, reaching for me. It's okay, baby. I forced the words out. Go with Daddy. Mommy will be okay. But I wouldn't be okay. I knew that now. Ryan lifted Emma, whispering something to her. Then he turned back to me, his mask fully in place. I'll take Emma home, he said. Get her settled. Melissa will stay with her tonight. I'll be back in the morning to check on you. Melissa, in my home, with my daughter. No, please, Ryan. Don't leave Emma with her. See, Ryan turned to Dr. Matthews, his voice heavy with manufactured sadness. She's even paranoid about childcare now. This is exactly why I need temporary custody. Doctor, can you note her irrational statements in her chart? Dr. Matthews looked away, but he made a note. Ryan leaned close one more time, his lips near my ear. You're in a hospital bed with a broken leg and no money. I have our daughter, our home, and every lawyer in New York on retainer. Sign the divorce papers, give me custody, and I'll let you have supervised visits. Fight me, and you'll never see Emma again. He kissed my forehead, gentle and loving for the security cameras mounted in the corners of the room. Then he left with Emma, my daughter's cries echoing down the hallway. I lay there in the hospital bed, my legs screaming, my baby kicking inside me as if sensing my distress. The temporary cast felt like a cage. The 2-week pain medication did nothing. A different nurse came in, older, with kind eyes. She adjusted my IV in silence, then whispered, my daughter went through something similar. Do you have somewhere safe to go? I don't have anything. The truth crashed over me. He took my daughter. He has all our money, but the house is in his family's name. I have nothing. The nurse pressed something into my palm. A business card. Grace Mitchell, attorney at law. Your friend called the hospital. The nurse said quietly, she said to tell you she's coming to get you in the morning. And she said to tell you, Marines don't quit. Marines don't quit. It was an old joke between Grace and me. We'd met in college, both of us on the track team. Both of us too stubborn to give up even when we were losing. Grace had gone through her own nightmare divorce 5 years ago. She'd survived. She'd helped other women survive. Could I survive this? I looked at the business card, at Grace's number, then at the hospital room door where my daughter had disappeared, then at my cast-encased leg. Already throbbing with infection, I could feel starting deep in the bone. Ryan had planned this perfectly. The Thanksgiving setup, Melissa's video, the medical power of attorney, the careful documentation of my supposed mental instability. How long had he been planning in this month's years, and what was his endgame? Just a divorce, custody of Emma. There had to be more. Ryan never did anything without calculating every angle, every benefit. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This was all planned. Kate, he's going to kill you. Get out now. It was the same unknown number that had been texting me for weeks. Warnings I'd ignored, too afraid to believe them. I tried to sit up, to reach for the call button, to do something. But my body betrayed me. The pain, the trauma, the fear, all of it crashed down at once. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the security camera in the corner, its red light blinking, recording everything. But who would see that footage? Who would care about one woman's word against a wealthy, charming man with lawyers and power and a perfectly constructed narrative? When I woke 8 hours later, Grace was sitting beside my bed, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes fierce with determination. She held a folder stuffed with papers. Okay, she said, we're going to fight. But Kate, I need you to understand something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Ryan's not just trying to divorce you. He's trying to destroy you. Why? I whispered. Grace opened the folder. Because 3 months ago, you increased your life insurance to $2 million. Except you didn't. Ryan did it, forging your signature. And the beneficiary, him. My blood ran cold. He's going to kill me. Grace nodded slowly. I think that's exactly what he's planning. And tonight was just the opening move. Grace got me released from the hospital the next morning against medical advice. The doctors wanted to keep me for observation, worried about the baby, concerned about my leg. but staying there meant staying under Ryan's control. Besides, I had bigger problems. Grace helped me into her car, my leg in its temporary cast awkward and heavy. Every movement sent fresh pain shooting through me. The crutches felt impossible to manage with my pregnant belly throwing off my balance. "We need to go straight to the courthouse," Grace said, pulling into traffic. "I filed an emergency restraining order last night. Judge Patricia Winters is hearing it this morning." A restraining order. It sounded so official, so protective. Maybe things would be okay. Maybe the system would work. "Grace," I said quietly, "about your fee. I don't know how I'll pay you right now. Ryan controls all our accounts. We'll figure it out." Grace's jaw was tight. "Right now, we focus on keeping you and Emma safe." The courthouse was a maze of marble hallways and security checkpoints. Grace navigated it with practiced ease while I hobbled behind on crutches, drawing stairs. Pregnant woman with a broken leg. I must have looked like a tragedy waiting to happen. Judge Winter's courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, American flag in the corner, rows of empty benches. Ryan sat at the defendant's table with Richard Sullivan and two other attorneys I didn't recognize. 3 lawyers for a restraining order hearing. Ryan looked up when I entered, his expression perfectly calibrated. Concerned, wounded, the victim of a crazy wife's accusations. Grace helped me into my seat. My leg throbbed, sending waves of nausea through me. I pressed a hand to my belly, feeling my son kick. "Hang on, baby. Please hang on." Judge Winters entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. "All rise." We rose, or tried to. I mostly just leaned heavily on the table. "This is a hearing for an emergency restraining order," Judge Winters said. "Mrs. Bennett, you're alleging domestic violence against your husband, Ryan Bennett. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." My voice came out stronger than I felt. "My husband broke my leg last night in front of our 3-year-old daughter. Then he refused to let doctors perform necessary surgery." Grace stood. "Your Honor, I have evidence, voice recordings of Mr. Bennett's threats and verbal abuse spanning 3 months. She held up a small digital recorder, the one I'd hidden in the kitchen, the one that had captured everything. Hope flickered in my chest. We had him. The recordings would prove everything. "Your Honor," Richard Sullivan stood smoothly. "If I may," Judge Winters nodded. "Proceed." Richard Sullivan pulled out a laptop, connected it to the courtroom's display screen. "My wife works in cybersecurity. She helped me verify the authenticity of this so-called evidence." He clicked a button. The screen showed the recorder's digital files. All of them empty. 0 bytes. The recorder was connected to Mrs. Bennett's home Wi-Fi network. Sullivan continued. "A network controlled by Mr. Bennett's company, which specializes in smart home technology. Yesterday afternoon at 2:15, someone remotely accessed the device and deleted all files." "No." The word came out as a gasp. "No, that's not possible. I had backup files on the cloud, also deleted." Sullivan said, "Same timestamp." "Your Honor, this appears to be a clumsy frame-up attempt. Mrs. Bennett created fake recordings, then deleted them to claim evidence tampering. I didn't delete anything." I turned to Grace, desperate. Tell them I gave you the recorder 2 weeks ago." But Grace's face had gone pale. She was looking at her own notes, realization dawning. "Kate, when did you last check the files?" The truth hit me like a physical blow. I'd assumed they were there, safe. My insurance policy. Ryan had known about the recorder the whole time. He'd let me think I was gathering evidence while he planned to destroy it. "Your Honor," Sullivan continued, "my client has evidence of his own. Real evidence. He played Melissa's video from last night. It had been edited perfectly. Starting with me throwing the glass, but cutting out everything before Ryan's announcement about the baby, the deliberately provocative setup. All of it gone. In the video, I looked unhinged, violent, attacking an innocent pregnant woman. Then Sullivan played something else. Audio from last month. Me on the phone with my therapist, talking about the dark thoughts I'd had after the miscarriage. How sometimes I didn't want to keep living. How the weight of everything felt impossible. "He's taking my therapy sessions," I whispered. "That's confidential. He can't use that." Actually, Sullivan said, your husband was paying for your therapy. Under New York law, the person paying for treatment has certain rights to medical records, especially when there's concern about danger to self or others. Judge Winters studied the evidence. Her expression, unreadable. Mrs. Bennett, do you have any other proof of abuse? Medical records, police reports. Witnesses, the ER doctor. I said desperately. Dr. Robert Matthews. He saw my leg. He knows it needs surgery. Ryan's refusing treatment to hurt me. Sullivan stood again. Your Honor, we have Dr. Matthews's notes. He documented that Mrs. Bennett fell after attacking Miss Cooper. Mr. Bennett, acting as her medical power of attorney, made a reasonable decision to postpone surgery due to anesthetic risks for the fetus. That's not abuse. That's a husband trying to protect his unborn child. Every answer. Ryan had an answer for everything. Your Honor, Grace tried. My client is clearly in danger. Last night was just the beginning. Judge Winters held up her hand. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand your concern, but without credible evidence of abuse, I can't grant a restraining order. However, given the circumstances, I'm ordering a custody evaluation for the minor child. Emma Bennett. No, I breathed. Your Honor, please, until that evaluation is complete, Judge Winters continued. Emma will remain in her father's primary custody. Mrs. Bennett, you'll have supervised visitation twice a week. Ryan's smile was barely visible, just a tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth. He'd won. The courtroom spun. Grace's hand on my arm was the only thing keeping me upright. Your Honor, Grace said, my client has nowhere to go. The marital home is in the husband's family trust. Can we at least ensure she has access to marital funds? Sullivan pulled out more papers. Mr. Bennett has already set up a temporary support account. $500 per week, deposited every Monday. $500. In a city where a one-bedroom apartment costs $3,000 a month. That's not enough to live on. Grace protested. It's more than generous, Sullivan countered, especially given Mrs. Bennett's attempts to frame my client and her documented mental instability. Judge Winters banged her gavel. Custody evaluation to be completed within 30 days. Next hearing scheduled for December 23rd. Court adjourned. It was over. I'd lost. Grace helped me out of the courtroom, my crutches scraping against marble floors. Ryan walked past us in the hallway, surrounded by his attorneys. He didn't even glance my way. But Richard Sullivan did. He handed Grace a business card. Divorce papers will be served tomorrow. If Mrs. Bennett signs and agrees to joint custody, we can make this easy. If she fights, it will get ugly. It's already ugly. Grace said. Sullivan smiled. You have no idea. We made it to Grace's car before I broke down, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, my broken leg screaming, my baby kicking frantically inside me. He planned everything, I gasped. The recordings, the video, the medical records. How long has he been planning this? Grace started the engine, her own hands shaking. I don't know. But Kate, we have to assume he's planning more. The life insurance, the systematic documentation of your supposed mental illness. Taking Emma. This is bigger than just a divorce. What do? I have no money, no home, no daughter. How do I fight this? You stay with me. Grace pulled into traffic. We regroup. We find evidence he can't delete. And we keep you alive. The words hung in the air. Keep you alive. Because if Ryan was planning what we thought he was planning, then the broken leg was just the beginning. The custody battle was theater. All of this was leading somewhere darker. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. Emma asks about you every night. She misses her mommy. Sign the papers. Kate, let's end this peacefully. Attached was a photo. Emma in her bedroom, the one I decorated with princess wallpaper and fairy lights. But in the photo went on. Melissa sat on the bed reading Emma a bedtime story. My daughter cuddled against her, looking content. Ryan was erasing me, replacing me, systematically removing me from my own life while I was still alive. Grace, I said, we need to find out who's been sending me the warning texts. Someone knows what Ryan's planning. Someone's trying to help. Grace nodded. I have a friend in the police department, Detective Sarah Holland. She owes me a favor. Let's see if she can trace the numbers. We drove to Grace's apartment in silence. She lived in a modest two-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing like my Westchester home with its designer furniture and empty perfection. But it was safe for now. Grace's living room became our war room. Papers spread across every surface. Evidence we didn't have. Theories we couldn't prove. A case built on hunches and fear. My leg throbbed with a deep, infected heat. I knew the bone wasn't healing right. Dr. Matthews had been right. Without surgery, permanent damage was setting in. But how could I get surgery when Ryan controlled my medical care? How could I do anything when Ryan controlled everything? Grace made tea and brought me pain pills. Not enough to touch the real pain, but something. Tomorrow, she said, we start fresh. We find Detective Holland. We trace those texts. We build a new case. But as I lay on Grace's couch that night, my broken leg elevated on pillows, my baby kicking inside me, I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan's whispered words in the hospital. You'll never see Emma again. What if he was right? What if I'd already lost? The infection set in 2 days later. My leg felt like fire, radiating heat through the cast. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on building our case with Grace. But by the third morning, I woke up shivering with fever. Grace took one look at me and grabbed her keys. We're going back to the hospital. I can't afford it. The $500 Ryan deposited had already gone to basic supplies. Food, toiletries, a phone charger. We'll figure it out later. Grace helped me to the car. Kate, you're burning up. This is serious. The emergency room was crowded. Hours of waiting. By the time Dr. Catherine Pierce examined me, my temperature had hit 103 degrees. Mrs. Bennett, Dr. Pierce said gently, your leg has a serious infection. Why wasn't this surgically repaired immediately? I tried to explain. Ryan, medical power of attorney, refused surgery, but the words kept tangling up. Dr. Pierce looked at my chart, her expression darkening. This fracture is now 5 days old. The bone has begun healing incorrectly. Even if we operate now, you're looking at permanent mobility issues. Likely a limp, chronic pain. The room tilted. Permanent. The word echoed in my head. Why would anyone delay necessary surgery? Dr. Pierce asked. Grace answered for me. Her husband broke her leg, then refused to authorize treatment. It's domestic violence, doctor. Dr. Pierce's eyes widened. Then we need to report this. I can get social services involved. Document everything. Hope flickered. Yes, please, document everything. But when the social worker arrived, she brought devastating news. Mrs. Bennett, I've reviewed your case. Unfortunately, your husband's decision to delay surgery, while medically inadvisable, was within his legal rights as your medical power of attorney. Without proof of malicious intent, we can't file charges. He broke her leg. Grace said, that's proof. The social worker showed us Melissa's video again, the edited version where I looked like the attacker. Without evidence contradicting this, and with your documented mental health history, this appears to be a domestic dispute where you were the aggressor. I didn't. My voice broke. Please. My daughter. He has my daughter. The social worker's expression softened slightly. I understand this is difficult, but the court has already awarded temporary custody to your husband. My job is to evaluate whether supervised visits should continue. She pulled out a form. Has there been any domestic violence in your current living situation? Grace stiffened beside me. I had to be careful. I'm staying with my attorney. It's safe. The social worker made notes. And your mental state, any suicidal thoughts? Self-harm, I'm the truth. I was drowning, but if I admitted that, they'd take Emma away permanently. I'm managing. Therapy twice a week. Taking my prenatal vitamins. The social worker didn't look convinced, but she finished her notes. I'll submit my report to the court. Continue with supervised visits. Take care of that leg. After she left, Dr. Pierce performed surgery. Emergency procedure to clean the infection and try to realign the bone. But the damage was done. You'll regain most mobility. Dr. Pierce told me afterward, but expect chronic pain, especially in cold weather, and you'll need physical therapy for months. I lay in the recovery room, my recasted leg heavy, wondering how to afford physical therapy when I couldn't even afford rent. Grace's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Kate, you need to see this. She showed me her phone, Facebook, Ryan's post from an hour ago. My heart is broken today. My wife is struggling with severe mental health issues. She attacked an innocent colleague, injured herself, and is now making false abuse allegations. I'm asking for prayers for Kate's recovery and for my daughter Emma during this difficult time. Please respect our privacy. The post had 300 likes already. Comments pouring in. So sorry you're going through this. You're such a good man. Praying for your wife's mental health. Stay strong for Emma. She needs a stable parent. Ryan had tagged our mutual friends, our neighbors, people from Emma's preschool. He was systematically turning everyone against me. Grace scrolled through more comments. Kate, there's worse. Someone had posted photos. Me being helped out of Grace's car, looking disheveled and broken. Me on crutches, my belly huge, my hair unwashed. I looked exactly like what Ryan wanted me to look like. Unstable, dangerous, unfit. Who took these? I whispered. Grace zoomed in on one photo. Reflections in a car window showed the photographer, a private investigator with a telephoto lens. Ryan's having you followed. Grace said, everything you do, everywhere you go, he's building a case. For what I already lost custody. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Kate, I think he's building a case for permanent termination of parental rights. If he can prove you're completely unfit, dangerous even, he could have your rights terminated entirely. No, the word came out as a sob. He can't. I'm her mother with enough money and enough documentation of your supposed mental illness. He can try. And in New York, with the right judge and the right lawyers, he might succeed. The third catastrophe hit when we left the hospital. Grace's car had been vandalized. Someone had spray painted one word across the hood in bright red letters. Crazy. The same word from Ryan's narrative. The word he used to describe me to anyone who would listen. Grace called the police. Officer Davis arrived, took photos, filled out a report, but his expression told me everything. This was just vandalism. Nothing they could prove, nothing that would help. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Officer Davis asked. Grace started to answer, but I cut her off. No, we don't know. Because what was the point? Even if we said Ryan, even if we explained everything, they'd check his alibi. He'd be somewhere visible, somewhere documented, with witnesses. He'd have hired someone, and we'd never prove it. We took a taxi back to Grace's apartment. The spray paint smell lingered on our clothes. Inside, Grace's landline was blinking with messages. She hit play. The first message was from Emma's preschool. Mrs. Bennett, we received concerning information from Mr. Bennett about your mental state. For the safety of all our students, we're asking that you not come to school property. If you violate this, we'll contact the police. The second message was from my old employer. Kate, it's Mr. Hammond. We saw Ryan's Facebook post. Given the circumstance, we think it's best if you don't return after maternity leave. We'll send your final paycheck to your last known address. The third message was from my dentist's office, canceling my upcoming appointment. The fourth was a hang-up. The fifth was my mother-in-law. Kate, dear, Ryan told us what happened. We're praying for you. But honey, you need serious help. Maybe it's best if you give Ryan custody and focus on getting better. Message after message. My whole world collapsing. Grace stood there listening to all of it, her jaw tight. He's coordinating this, calling everyone you know, poisoning them against you. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, the same one that had warned me before. Check your bank account. Now, I opened my banking app with shaking hands. The account Ryan had set up for my $500 weekly allowance showed a balance of zero. Scrolling through transactions, I saw it. Ryan had reversed the deposit, claiming it was sent in error, and he'd somehow accessed the account to withdraw everything, including the $50 I'd saved from the week before. There was a note on the transaction. Mental health evaluation required before funds release. He wants me evaluated again, I said numbly. He's holding my money hostage until I submit to another psychiatric evaluation. One that will probably happen while you're stressed, malnourished, and traumatized. Grace said, one that you'll fail. The room spun. No money, no job, no reputation, no daughter, no health. Everything was gone. I looked down at my phone, at the unknown number that kept warning me. Who are you? I typed. The response came immediately. Someone who knows what Ryan's planning. Meet me tomorrow. Riverside Park, 2 in the afternoon. Come alone. I showed Grace. She shook her head. Absolutely not. It could be a trap, or it could be someone who can actually help us. What do we have to lose? Grace looked around her apartment at our pathetic war room, at the evidence we didn't have, at the case we couldn't build, at me, broken and desperate and running out of options. Everything, she said quietly. We have everything to lose. But I was done losing. Tomorrow, I'd meet the mysterious texter. Tomorrow, I'd find out who knew Ryan's plans. Tomorrow, I'd start fighting back. Because Ryan was right about one thing. I was unstable. I was desperate. I was dangerous. Just not in the way he thought. I stood in Grace's bathroom that night, staring at myself in the mirror. Hollow eyes, unwashed hair, the walking cast on my leg like a physical representation of everything broken. On the counter sat a bottle of pills, Grace's prescription sleep medication. Strong ones. Enough. I could take them. End this nightmare. Emma wouldn't remember me. She was only 3. Ryan would tell her I died from complications, or some other convenient lie. She'd grow up calling Melissa Mom. I unscrewed the cap, poured pills into my palm. 40 small white tablets. Emma's voice echoed in my memory. Mommy, why did Daddy hurt you if I died now? What would I be teaching her? That when men hurt you, you give up, that mothers abandon their children when things get hard. My mother's voice joined Emma's. A memory from when I was 16. Running track with a sprained ankle. Bennett women don't quit. We finish what we start. I looked at the ultrasound photo taped to the mirror. My son, floating safe inside me. He was counting on me. Emma was counting on me. I poured the pills back into the bottle. Every single one, you see, Bennett women don't quit. The next morning, Grace tried to stop me from meeting the mysterious texter. It could be a trap, or it could be someone who can help us. What do we have to lose? At 2 o'clock, I sat on a bench in Riverside Park. Grace watched from 50 yards away. A woman approached. Mid-40s, badge on her belt, Catherine Bennett. Her voice was low. Who are you, Detective Sarah Holland? NYPD. Don't look at me directly. Ryan has someone following you. I kept my eyes on the river. I know. He vandalized my friend's car. That wasn't Ryan. That was ordered by his father, Richard Bennett. His father, what does he have to do with this? Everything. Detective Holland's jaw tightened. Ryan's not the real problem. His father runs a money laundering operation for organized crime. Hundreds of millions. We've been investigating for 3 years. Why are you telling me this? Because 6 months ago, Ryan took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you. Around the same time, his father started moving money offshore, preparing for something. My blood went cold. He's going to kill me. After your baby is born, probably staged as suicide from postpartum depression. With your documented mental health history, nobody would question it. The broken leg, the custody battle, the destruction of my reputation, all groundwork for murder. Why don't you arrest him? We don't have enough evidence yet. Richard's careful. Ryan's careful. We need someone inside. You want me to be your informant? I want to save your life. Detective Holland handed me something. A bracelet that looked like medical alert jewelry. Recording device. Encrypted. Transmits directly to my servers. Wear it constantly. Ryan will slip up. And if he doesn't slip up before he kills me, then at least we'll have evidence to prosecute after. Her honesty was brutal. I can't promise this ends well, Kate, but if you help us, we'll do everything we can to keep you and your children safe. What do I have to do? Keep living your life. Document everything. If Ryan contacts you, engage him. Let him talk. The more confident he gets, the sloppier he'll become. How do I contact you? You don't. I'll contact you. Detective Holland met my eyes. The pills in your friend's medicine cabinet, I'm glad you didn't take them. She walked away, disappearing into the crowds. Back at Grace's apartment, I told her everything. Grace listened, her expression darkening. This makes sense, she said. The prenup, the medical power of attorney, the timing. He was setting you up from the start. What do we do? You're going to sign the divorce papers. What Ryan needs to feel like he's won. So we give him that. You sign, agree to his terms, play the defeated wife, then we wire you up and let him confess. What if he doesn't confess? Men like Ryan love to gloat. They can't help themselves. You'll meet with him to finalize details about Emma's visitation. He'll want to explain how smart he was. And if he doesn't talk, then we have nothing. And you're probably dead within 6 months. Grace's brutal honesty matched Detective Holland's. But this is the only play we have left. I thought about the pills, about giving up, about Emma asking why Daddy hurt Mommy. Bennett women don't quit. Set up the meeting. I said, I'll sign the papers. Grace called Richard Sullivan that afternoon. My client is ready to sign everything. She wants to finalize quickly. Sullivan's surprise was audible. May I ask what changed her mind? She wants to focus on the baby's health, and she misses her daughter. This fight is hurting everyone. After a pause, Sullivan agreed to arrange a meeting. Kate would like to meet with Ryan directly, to apologize. I'll consult with my client. Perhaps that can be arranged. After Grace hung up, we sat in silence. The trap was set. My phone buzzed. Emma's calling. Mommy? Her small voice broke something inside me. Hi, baby. I love you so much. I miss you. Mommy, when can I come home? Soon, sweetheart. I promise. Ryan's voice into the background. Emma, say goodbye to Mommy. But Daddy, I want to talk more. Now, Emma. The call ended. I sat there, phone in hand, and made a vow. Ryan thought he was going to kill me. Thought he'd take my children and my life and get away with it. He was wrong. I was going to take him down. Not just for me. For Emma. For my unborn son. For every woman who'd ever been systematically destroyed by a man who thought power meant permission. Bennett women don't quit. And I was about to show Ryan exactly what that meant. Richard Sullivan called back 3 hours later. Mr. Bennett has agreed to meet tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, at the marital home. He'd like privacy for this conversation. Perfect. Grace said, we'll be there. After she hung up, Grace turned to me. This is it, Kate. Last chance to back out. I'm not backing out. I clipped Detective Holland's bracelet onto my wrist. The metal was cool against my skin. How do we know it's working? Grace's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Audio check successful. Detective Holland is listening. Tomorrow evening. Grace said, you'll go to the house? I'll be in a car outside with Holland. The moment Ryan says anything incriminating, we move in. What if he doesn't say anything incriminating? I asked. Then you keep him talking. Ask questions. Make him feel superior. Men like Ryan love explaining how smart they are. That night, I barely slept. My leg throbbed. My baby kicked constantly. Sensing my stress, I kept thinking about Emma in that house, sleeping in her princess bed while Ryan planned my murder in the next room. The next day crawled by. Grace made me practice. Questions to ask Ryan. How to keep my voice steady. How to hide the bracelet under my sleeve. At 6:30, Grace drove me to Westchester, to the home I'd lived in for 5 years, the place where I'd been happy once, before I understood what Ryan really was. I'll be right here, Grace said, parking down the street. Holland's in the car behind us. You have your phone? Yes. My hands shook. If anything feels wrong, if he gets violent, you run. Don't try to get more evidence. Just get out. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The walk to the front door felt like walking to an execution. My crutches scraped on the driveway. The house loomed, all its expensive perfection, suddenly sinister. Ryan opened the door before I could knock. He looked good, rested, happy, like destroying my life agreed with him. Kate, he stepped back, letting me in. Thank you for coming. The house smelled the same, vanilla candles and expensive furniture polish, but it felt different, emptier, like a stage set rather than a home. Emma's things were gone from the living room. Her toys, her little shoes by the door, all of it packed away. Where's Emma? I asked. With my mother. I thought it best if we talked alone. We sat in the living room, Ryan in his usual armchair, me on the couch where I'd sat pregnant with Emma, where I'd read her bedtime stories, where I'd believed my marriage was real. I brought the papers. I pulled them from my bag. Divorce agreement, custody terms, all of it signed. Ryan took them, barely glancing at my signatures. Good, and this is the right choice. Kate, I need to know something. I kept my voice steady, my wrist angled so the bracelet's microphone pointed toward him. Why? Why did you do all this? Ryan smiled. That smile I'd once found charming. Do what? The affair with Melissa, the Thanksgiving dinner, breaking my leg, all of it. I just want to understand. He settled back in his chair, comfortable, confident. Kate, there was no affair with Melissa. What Melissa works for my father. I paid her $50,000 to play the part of my pregnant mistress. The baby's not mine. I needed you to react badly, publicly, so I could document your instability. My stomach turned, but I kept my face neutral. Why go to that trouble? Because divorce in New York is complicated, expensive, especially when children are involved. His voice was casual, like he was discussing a business deal. I needed clean custody. No questions, no court battles, and the best way to get that was to make me look crazy. Exactly. Ryan leaned forward. You were always going to be a problem. Kate, too smart, too observant. You were starting to ask questions about my father's business, where money came from, why we had so much cash. I was just curious. I said it softly, keeping him talking. Curiosity is dangerous. Ryan's eyes went cold. My father's operation has stayed hidden for 30 years. We can't afford liabilities. Operation, I repeated the word. What operation? Import-export? Among other things. Ryan waved his hand dismissively. The details don't matter. What matters is that you were becoming a risk. So you decided to eliminate me. Not a question. A statement. Not immediately. Ryan stood, walked to the window. First, I needed custody of Emma. Needed everyone to believe you were unstable, unfit, dangerous. Then, after the baby was born, we'd wait 3 months. Postpartum depression is so common, so tragic. And with your history, your documented mental illness, no one would question it. Question what? Ryan, your suicide. He said it so casually. Pills. Probably. You take too many of your prescribed medications. Leave a note about how you couldn't handle being the mother anymore. Emma would stay with me, the baby too. The life insurance would pay out $2 million, and Richard Sullivan would make sure no one investigated too closely. Ryan turned, surprised I knew his father's attorney's name. You've been doing research. I've had a lot of time to think. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. What about Emma? Doesn't she deserve her mother? Emma will barely remember you. She's already calling Melissa by her first name. Give it 6 months, and she'll forget you entirely. The words hurt more than the broken leg ever had, and our son Ryan's smile was cruel. I haven't decided yet if I want to keep him. Depends on whether the insurance payout is worth the hassle of raising another kid. Rage burned through me, but I forced it down. One more question, one more piece of evidence. When did you plan all this? How long have you been setting me up? Ryan walked back to his chair, sat down, completely relaxed. 3 years. Since you got pregnant with Emma, that's when I realized you'd be a permanent fixture, a witness to everything. So I started planning. The medical power of attorney, signing when Emma was born. You were so drugged up, you didn't read it. The prenup that gave you financial control, signing before the wedding. You were so in love. You trusted me completely. The life insurance policy. Increased 6 months ago. Forged your signature. Ryan's smile widened. You made it so easy. Kate, you trusted me. You believed I loved you. You never suspected until it was too late. I stood slowly, using my crutches for balance. You're right. I trusted you. I loved you. I believed our marriage was real. Ryan stood too. And that was your mistake. No. My voice was stronger now. My mistake was thinking you were smart enough to get away with this. Ryan's expression flickered. What? I held up my wrist, showing him the bracelet. This entire conversation has been recorded and transmitted in real time to Detective Sarah Holland of the NYPD. She's been investigating your father's money laundering operation for 3 years, and you just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder. The color drained from Ryan's face. That's not. The front door crashed open. Police officers poured in, Detective Holland leading them. Ryan Bennett. Detective Holland's voice rang with authority. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence, fraud, and racketeering. Ryan lunged toward me. Officers grabbed him, forcing him to the ground. He fought, screaming obscenities, the charming mask finally ripping away to show the monster underneath. You stupid bitch, Ryan spit at me. You'll never get away with this. My father, the lawyers, they'll destroy you. Your father's being arrested right now, Detective Holland said calmly, cuffing Ryan, and Richard Sullivan is being charged as an accessory. It's over. Mr. Bennett. Grace burst through the door, running to me. Kate, are you okay? I couldn't speak, could only nod. My legs gave out, crutches clattering to the floor. Grace caught me before I fell. As officers led Ryan out, he looked back at me one last time. I underestimated you. Yes, I said quietly. You did. The police station was key. Officers moving between rooms, phones ringing, evidence being processed. I sat in a conference room with Grace and Detective Holland, giving my official statement for the third time. Walk me through the Thanksgiving dinner again, Detective Holland said. Every detail matters for the prosecution. I repeated it all. Melissa arriving with Ryan, the announcement about the baby, the deliberately provocative setup, my reaction, Ryan shoving me, the crack of my leg breaking. And Emma witnessed all of this, yes. My voice broke. She was 3 feet away. She watched her father break her mother's leg. Detective Holland made notes. We'll need Emma to testify eventually. With a child psychologist present, of course. She's 3 years old. How can she testify children that young can give statements in domestic violence cases? It won't be easy, but her testimony could be powerful. Grace squeezed my hand, one step at a time. Kate, we worked for 6 hours, building the case. The recording from my bracelet was clear, damning, perfect. But Detective Holland wanted more. Ryan's lawyer will claim entrapment, she explained. We'll argue the recording was obtained illegally. We need corroborating evidence. What about Melissa, I asked. She was paid to play a part. Will she testify? We picked her up 2 hours ago. She's cooperating in exchange for immunity. Her testimony about being hired to provoke you will help establish premeditation. And Richard Bennett, being interrogated now. Detective Holland smiled grimly. His operation was bigger than we thought. 17 offshore accounts, money laundered through a dozen shell companies, import-export businesses in 6 countries. Ryan was set to take over the entire network. So I was just, what collateral damage? You were a smart woman who might have figured it out. Men like Richard Bennett don't take chances. It was midnight before they let me leave. Grace drove us back to her apartment in silence. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. You did it, Grace said finally. You took him down. Did I? I felt numb. He's arrested. But that doesn't mean conviction. His family has money, lawyers, connections. The recording is solid. Grace's voice was firm. And Melissa's testimony backs it up. Kate, you won. But what did I win? Emma's still traumatized. My leg will never heal right. I'm about to give birth while my husband's in jail awaiting trial. This doesn't feel like winning. We arrived at Grace's apartment. Inside, she made tea while I sat on the couch, my leg throbbing. Tomorrow, Grace said, we file for emergency custody. With Ryan arrested and Richard Bennett's assets frozen, you'll get Emma back. And then what? How do I explain to a 3-year-old why daddy's not coming home? You tell her the truth, age-appropriate truth. Grace sat beside me. Kate, there's no manual for this. You're going to have to figure it out as you go. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Bennett, a woman's voice. This is Officer Brennan from Westchester Child Protective Services. We have Emma Bennett in our custody. My heart stopped. What? Why, Mr. Bennett's mother brought her to the police station after his arrest. She stated she couldn't care for a 3-year-old. Emma's been placed in temporary foster care pending custody evaluation. No, I struggled to stand. No, she's my daughter. I'm her mother. I understand, ma'am, but we need to follow protocol. You can pick her up tomorrow morning at 9. Bring identification and proof of relationship. Proof that I'm her mother, I gave birth to her. The officer's voice softened slightly. Standard procedure. Ma'am, 9 o'clock tomorrow. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, rage and despair warring inside me. Emma's in foster care. The words came out choked. They took Emma. Grace was already grabbing her coat. We're going there now, tonight. They won't release her until tomorrow. Then we'll wait outside until 9 o'clock. Grace's determination matched my own. Bennett women don't quit. Right. We drove to the Child Protective Services office. The building was dark, closed. We sat in Grace's car, watching the empty windows. I should have gotten her sooner. I said, should have fought harder. You fought with everything you had. Grace's voice was fierce. Ryan was rich, connected, and had a plan. You were alone with a broken leg. The fact that you're alive right now is a miracle. I don't want miracles. I want my daughter. We sat there all night. Grace dozed in the driver's seat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, heard her voice. Mommy, when can I come home? At 8:30, a woman arrived to open the building. Grace and I were inside by 8:45. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Anna Campbell, met us in a conference room. Emma's fine. She slept well, had breakfast. She's been asking for you. Can I see her? In a moment. First, I need to verify some information. Anna Campbell pulled out forms. Your relationship to the child, I'm her mother. I showed identification. Emma's birth certificate from my bag. Photos of us together. And Mr. Bennett arrested last night for conspiracy to commit murder. Among other charges. Grace handed over documentation. My client is requesting emergency full custody. Anna Campbell reviewed everything. The process usually takes longer, but given the circumstances, I can release Emma to you today. However, she paused. I need to be honest. Mrs. Bennett, Emma's been through trauma. She witnessed domestic violence. She's been moved between homes. She may have behavioral issues. I understand. She might not remember you clearly. Children Emma's age sometimes block out traumatic periods. I don't care if she doesn't remember me. I'll help her remember. I'll be her mother every day until she does. Anna Campbell studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Wait here. She left and returned 5 minutes later, holding Emma's hand. My daughter looked tiny, scared, clutching a stuffed rabbit I didn't recognize. Emma, Anna Campbell said gently, this is your mommy. Emma looked at me. Her blue eyes were wary, uncertain. The lady from the hospital. Yes, baby. The lady from the hospital. I knelt down, ignoring the pain in my leg. I'm your mommy. I love you so much. Emma didn't move toward me. Daddy said you were sick. Daddy was wrong. I kept my voice steady. Even though I was breaking inside, I'm not sick. I'm right here, and I'm going to take you home. To the big house. No, sweetheart. To a different home, with Auntie Grace. It's safe there, and I'll be with you every day. Emma considered this. Then, slowly, she walked toward me. Can I bring my rabbit? Of course, I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her small body against mine. You can bring whatever you want. Emma hugged me back, tentatively at first, then tighter. I missed you, Mommy. I missed you too, baby. So much. We left Child Protective Services together. Emma between Grace and me. My daughter held my hand, her small fingers in mine, and for the first time in weeks, something inside me unclenched. Ryan was in jail. I had Emma back. My son was safe inside me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but we were alive. We were together. That was enough. For now, that was enough. 8 months passed. 8 months of healing, adjusting, surviving. My son was born in March. I named him Daniel, after my father. Grace was in the delivery room with me, holding my hand while I pushed. Emma waited in the hospital lobby with a volunteer, coloring pictures to welcome her baby brother. The birth was hard. My leg, still healing, complicated everything. But Daniel arrived healthy, perfect. 7 pounds, 3 ounce, blue eyes like his sister. No resemblance to Ryan at all. Thank God. Emma loved him immediately. My baby, she'd say, touching his tiny fingers. I protect him. Mommy. Yes, sweetie. We protect him together. Ryan's trial began in May. I sat in the courtroom every day, Grace beside me, Daniel in a carrier at my feet, Emma with Grace's mother, who'd flown in to help. The prosecution built their case methodically. The recording of Ryan's confession, Melissa's testimony about being hired, financial records showing the life insurance policy, my medical records documenting the broken leg and denied surgery. Ryan's defense tried everything. Claimed the recording was entrapment, said I'd seduced him into confessing, argued that he never actually hurt me, that my fall was accidental. But the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Robert Matthews testified. She had a tibial plateau fracture that required immediate surgery. Mr. Bennett, as her medical power of attorney, refused authorization. The delay caused permanent damage. Detective Sarah Holland testified. The Bennett family has been under investigation for money laundering and racketeering for 3 years. Ryan Bennett was being groomed to take over the operation. Mrs. Bennett was identified as a liability. Melissa took the stand, looking nervous in a gray suit. Ryan paid me $50,000 to pretend to be his mistress, to provoke Kate into reacting badly at Thanksgiving. He told me it was to help with his divorce. I didn't know he planned to kill her. Emma's testimony was the hardest. A child psychologist conducted the interview in a private room. Video fed to the courtroom. Emma sat in a colorful playroom, playing with dolls. Can you tell me what happened at Thanksgiving dinner? The psychologist asked gently. Emma made 2 dolls face each other. Daddy pushed Mommy. Mommy fell down. Her leg made a scary sound. I was scared. What did Daddy do after Mommy fell? Emma's small voice wavered. He was mad. He said Mommy was bad. In the courtroom, I watched the jury. Several women were crying. One man had his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Ryan sat at the defense table, expressionless. His expensive suit, his perfect hair, all of it unable to hide what he really was. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses. People who said Ryan was a good man, a devoted father, a pillar of the community. But then Grace called a surprise witness, Ryan's first wife. I didn't know he'd been married before. Ryan had told me I was his first serious relationship. The woman who took the stand was 40, elegant, with a haunted look in her eyes. She stated her name as Margaret Foster. Mrs. Foster. Grace said, "Can you describe your marriage to Ryan Bennett?" Margaret Foster's hands shook. We were married for 3 years. He was charming at first, then controlling, then violent. Did you report the violence? No. Her voice was barely audible. He convinced me I was crazy, that I'd imagined it. When I finally tried to leave, he had me committed to a psychiatric facility for 2 weeks. The courtroom erupted. Ryan's attorney objected furiously, but the judge overruled. What happened after you were released? Grace asked. I signed divorce papers giving Ryan everything. I was afraid if I fought, he'd kill me. Why didn't you come forward before Margaret Foster looked directly at Ryan? Because I was afraid. But when I saw Kate's story on the news, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Her testimony destroyed Ryan's defense. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The foreman stood. We find the defendant, Ryan Bennett, guilty on all charges: conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence, fraud, racketeering. Ryan showed no emotion, just sat there, empty. The judge sentenced him 2 weeks later, 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder, 3 years for domestic violence, 5 years for fraud, all concurrent, plus fines totaling $800,000. Ryan will be eligible for parole in 12 years. 12 years. Emma would be 15. Daniel would be 12, old enough to know what their father was. Richard Bennett got 30 years. His operation dismantled, assets seized. The empire he'd built over 3 decades destroyed in a single trial. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Grace fielded questions while I held Daniel, Emma clinging to my leg. Mrs. Bennett, how do you feel? A reporter shouted. Relieved, I said simply, and tired. What's next for you? I'm going to be a mother, going to heal, going to live. We walked away from the cameras, from the courthouse, from that chapter of our lives. But the ending wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. 2 years after Ryan's conviction, I stood in my small apartment in Queens, not Westchester, not the wealthy suburb with the perfect house, Just a modest two-bedroom with creaky floors and neighbors who sometimes played music too loud. But it was mine, paid for with the settlement from Ryan's assets. Not millions, just enough to start over. Emma was 5 now, in kindergarten. She had nightmares 3 times a week, saw a child psychologist twice weekly, was terrified of men with deep voices because they reminded her of Ryan. Last week, she'd ask me, "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like other kids?" I'd knelt down to her level. "You have a father, sweetie, but he made bad choices. He hurt people. So he can't be with us." "Did he hurt you?" Amman had hugged me then, her small arms fierce. "I won't let anyone hurt you." "Mommy," Daniel was 2, bright, curious, unaware of the darkness that surrounded his conception. He called Grace Auntie Grace and thought she'd always lived with us because she had moved in. Her apartment had been too small for all of us, so we'd pooled resources, 2 broken women and 2 traumatized children, building something new from the ruins. I worked part-time from home, writing articles about domestic violence for various publications. My book, The Perfect Trap, had been published 6 months ago. It sold modestly. Enough to help with bills, not enough to change our lives. My leg never healed right. I walked with a limp. Chronic pain flared when it rained. Physical therapy helped some, but Dr. Pierce had been right. Permanent damage. I hadn't dated since Ryan. Couldn't imagine trusting someone that way again. The thought of letting a man close to me, close to my children, made my skin crawl. Some victories are incomplete. Some scars don't heal. I was learning to live with that. Grace had started a nonprofit, Justice for Domestic Violence Survivors, pro bono legal help for women without resources. 3 attorneys now, growing every year. Tonight was our monthly support group, 10 women in Grace's living room, sharing stories, new members with fresh bruises, longtime members who'd survived and were rebuilding. I usually listened more than I spoke, but tonight a new woman arrived, shaking, scared, her arm in a sling. "Did it get better?" she asked me. "After you left, after the trial, did life get better?" I looked around the room, at Grace, my best friend who'd saved my life, at the other survivors, warriors all of them. At the pile of toys in the corner where Emma and Daniel played. Better isn't the right word, I said honestly. It got real. I still have nightmares. My daughter still flinches when someone raises their voice. I limp when it rains. I'm broke. I work 2 jobs. My ex-husband's in prison, but he'll be out eventually. The woman's face fell. "So it doesn't get better." I didn't say that. I leaned forward. "It gets real. You stop pretending everything's okay. You stop performing happiness. You deal with the PTSD, the trauma, the financial devastation. You cry when you need to cry. You rage when you need to rage. You heal slowly, imperfectly." I paused, making sure she heard me. "But you're free. You're alive. And you get to decide what comes next. That's not a fairy tale ending. But it's your ending. And you earned it." The woman wiped her eyes. "How did you find the strength?" I didn't find it. I made a choice. Fight or disappear. And I chose to fight. After the meeting, I walked home slowly. Emma held my hand on one side, Daniel in a stroller on the other. The November air was cold, bringing back memories of that Thanksgiving 3 years ago. "Mommy," Emma said, "can we have turkey tomorrow?" "Oh, sure, baby. We can have a little Thanksgiving. Just us. And Auntie Grace, of course." And Auntie Grace, Daniel babbled something in his toddler language. Emma translated, "He wants pie. We'll have pie too." I smiled. "We'll have everything." At home, I tucked Emma into bed. She insisted I check the locks 3 times. Another ritual born from trauma. "Mommy," she said sleepily, "are we safe now?" "Yeah, sweet. We're safe. Promise," I promised, and I meant it. Not because nothing bad would ever happen again, but because I would fight like hell to protect them. Because we'd survived the worst. Because Bennett women don't quit. After Emma fell asleep, I stood in my small kitchen, so different from the Westchester penthouse. No marble counters, no designer appliances, just laminate and secondhand everything. But it was ours, built on truth instead of lies, messy instead of perfect, real instead of performed. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I tensed, old fears rising. But it was Detective Holland. Thought you'd want to know. Richard Bennett died in prison today. Heart attack. I stared at the message. Felt nothing. No relief, no joy, no satisfaction. Just empty acknowledgement that one monster was gone. The world kept turning. Emma would still have nightmares. Daniel would still grow up without a father. My leg would still hurt when it rained. But we were here. We were alive. We were free. That was enough. 5 years after that Thanksgiving, I stood in a courtroom again. But this time I wasn't the victim. A young woman named Sarah trembled on the witness stand, testifying against her husband. He'd broken her collarbone, tried to strangle her, told everyone she was crazy when she tried to report it. The defense attorney was brutal, picking apart her story, questioning her memory, suggesting she'd exaggerated, lied, wanted attention. Sarah's voice got smaller with each question. She was losing, folding under pressure. Then she looked up and saw me in the gallery. Our eyes met. I nodded. Just once. You've got this. Something shifted in Sarah's face. She sat up straighter. When the attorney asked his next dismissive question, she looked him dead in the eye. No, she said firmly. That's not what happened. I'm telling you exactly what happened. And you can try to twist my words all you want. But I know the truth. I lived it. The attorney blinked, surprised. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. My husband choked me until I passed out. When I woke up, he told me I'd fallen. He'd been telling me I was crazy for 2 years, making me think I imagined his violence. But I didn't imagine this. She pulled down her turtleneck, showing faded bruises in the shape of hands. I didn't imagine this either. Sarah pulled out her phone, showed photos, messages from her husband. You're worthless. No one will believe you. I'll take the kids and you'll never see them again. The courtroom went silent. The jury ruled in her favor 3 hours later. Protective order granted. Full custody awarded to Sarah. Her husband would serve 18 months for assault. Outside the courthouse, Sarah found me on the steps. Thank you, she said, tears streaming. I saw you sitting there and I remembered what you wrote in your book, that survivors don't quit. I hugged her gently. You did all the hard work. You survived. Everything else is just details. Sarah smiled through her tears. How are you doing? I read that your ex-husband's up for parole soon. Next month. My stomach tightened at the thought. Emma's 8 now. Old enough to write a victim impact statement. Old enough to tell the parole board she doesn't want her father released. That must be hard for her. Everything about this is hard. But we're managing. I walked away from the courthouse, headed to the subway. Emma would be getting out of school soon. Daniel would be waiting at aftercare. My life had become a routine of small moments. Making lunches, helping with homework, working my job at Grace's nonprofit, writing articles, going to therapy, attending support groups. No grand victories, no dramatic endings, just the quiet persistence of surviving. Emma was doing better. Still had nightmares, but less frequent. Still saw her therapist, but was learning to process her trauma. She wanted to be a lawyer when she grew up, to help other kids like her. Daniel was bright and funny. He knew his father was in prison, knew the age-appropriate version of why. I like a question sometimes that broke my heart. Why did Daddy hurt you, he'd asked last month. Because some people are broken in ways that make them hurt others. I'd answered, and because I was strong enough to survive him. Daniel had considered this. Then, in that profound way children sometimes have, he'd said, You're still strong, Mommy. Yes, baby. I'm still strong. My phone rang. Grace calling. Hey, what's up? Good news. Remember that woman who came to group last month? The one with 3 kids and nowhere to go? Yes, her restraining order was approved. We found her an apartment. She starts her new job. Monday. Grace's voice was warm with satisfaction. Another one saved. That's great, I smiled. You're making a difference, Grace. We're making a difference, Grace corrected. Your book, your articles, your testimony in cases like today. You're helping more women than you know. After we hung up, I sat on the subway thinking about that, about the chain of survival. Margaret Foster had survived Ryan and testified to help me. I'd survived and testified to help Sarah. Sarah would survive and help the next woman. Trauma passed down, But so did strength. So did hope. So did the stubborn refusal to let monsters win. The subway lurched to my stop. I climbed the stairs, my leg aching like it always did after too much walking. Picked up Daniel from aftercare. Met Emma at her school. "Mommy," Emma said, running to hug me. "I got an A on my spelling test." "That's wonderful. Baby." I kissed the top of her head. "I'm so proud of you." We walked home together. Emma chattering about her day. Daniel holding my hand. Just another ordinary November afternoon. Cold air, busy streets, the rhythm of city life. But I noticed things now that I never noticed before. The woman with the heavy makeup covering a bruise. The man gripping his partner's arm too tight. The little girl who flinched when her father raised his voice. I saw them. Recognized them. Sometimes, if I could, I slipped them my card. Grace's nonprofit information. The domestic violence hotline number. A quiet acknowledgement. "I see you. You're not alone." Most didn't take the card, weren't ready yet. But some did, and maybe that card saved a life. Maybe that small gesture made the difference. At home, I made dinner while Emma did homework at the kitchen table, and Daniel played with his trucks. Normal, boring, beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. For a second, old fear spiked, but it was just someone who'd read my book. "Thank you for sharing your story. I'm leaving my husband tonight. Your book gave me the courage." I texted back, "You're braver than you know. There's a hotline and nonprofit information in the back of the book. Use them. You don't have to do this alone." The stranger's response came quickly. "Are you happy now?" After everything, I looked around my small kitchen, at my mismatched dishes, at Emma's spelling test on the refrigerator, at Daniel's toys scattered across the floor, at my life, imperfect and real and hard won. Happy isn't the right word. I typed, "I'm free, I'm alive, I'm fighting. Some days are hard. Some days I can barely function. But I chose this life instead of letting someone take it from me. And that choice saved me." After dinner, after baths, after bedtime stories, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights. Millions of people out there. Thousands of women in situations like mine had been. Thousands of children witnessing violence. Thousands of monsters hiding behind charming smiles. But also thousands of survivors. Thousands of women who'd made that choice. Fight or disappear, and chose to fight. The cycle breaks when we decide it breaks. I'd written in my book. When we refuse to be erased, when we tell our stories, when we help the next woman, and the next, and the next. Ryan would be up for parole next month, might be released, might try to fight for visitation rights, might try to hurt us again. But I wasn't the same woman he'd broken 5 years ago. I'd learned to fight, to survive, to thrive despite him. And if he came back, if he tried again, I'd fight harder. Because Bennett women don't quit, and I'd be damned if I'd let my children learn anything less. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, bad dream." I scooped her up, carried her to the couch, held her close while she cried quietly into my shoulder. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. I've got you. Promise you'll always protect me." Emma's voice was small. "I promise, always. No matter what. Even from Daddy." The question hung in the air. The truth was complicated. Ryan would always be her father, and she'd always carry that. Always wonder. Always hurt. But I could give her this promise, this certainty, especially from Daddy. I said firmly, "If he ever tries to hurt you or your brother, I will stop him, no matter what it takes." Emma relaxed against me. "Okay, I believe you." We sat there in the dark, mother and daughter, both of us marked by violence, both of us healing slowly. The city hummed outside. Life continued, and we continued with it. Not perfect, not healed, but surviving, fighting, choosing every day to keep living despite the pain. That was my ending. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect victory, just the stubborn, imperfect, hard-won survival of a woman who refused to quit. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.